Welcome back. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to your weekly island of sanity. Nice to be here together. So this evening, I like when we are changing sections in this book to do a little bit of like a recap of the main themes of the book, which if it's your first time here, fantastic, good timing. And if you have been coming regularly, also wonderful. This book is the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. And yeah, it has three main parts in it. The first part is really helping us see and understand why it's so important or so useful to adhere ourselves to bodhicitta, to the awakened heart for all beings. And the second part is more methods. That's where we've been. And a lot of the methods are around patience, practicing patience, learning attentiveness. And then we'll be moving to the third part next week. And that is really how do we sustain these practices? So this first part of kind of defining and understanding really what is bodhicitta. The whole purpose of this book in some ways is to cultivate, maybe even just uncover bodhicitta in our lives. And I think it's really good to reconnect to that feeling. I often wonder myself, what is bodhicitta in terms of the felt sense? What is bodhicitta in terms of kind of how it orients the mind? And then what is bodhicitta in terms of how it influences our behavior? So I wanted to share a couple really beautiful passages from the beginning about why bodhicitta matters. One is that bodhicitta is a basic human wisdom that can drive away the sorrows of the world. So often when we think of opening our heart to the suffering or the difficulty of others in our world, we assume that's going to be an experience that's difficult for us. But we should do that. That's what's the right thing to do, or we feel motivated. But this orientation, it really reminds us that bodhicitta is the very best thing we can do for ourselves. Actually, the way for us to feel less distress and less sorrow. And the fundamental reason why is bodhicitta very persistently, meticulously, it starts to peel away the layers of our self-centered attachment, our preoccupation with ourselves, with what we think is important, what matters to us. And not because we want to denigrate ourselves or put ourselves down in any way, but because often we live in this fantasy delusion of us being the center of the world. We are the center of our world. And that's actually a whole lot of pressure. You might think being the center of your world would make you feel elevated, important, when in fact, it often just makes us feel that we're not measuring up, we're not doing it right. There's kind of that never enough quality. And that self-centered fixation also makes us feel, maybe needless to say, separate from others. And that's kind of an impossible way to live. So this cultivation of bodhicitta, it opens our eyes to the reality of our interdependence. And it also invites us to consider every action, every word, every thought to be infused with this beautiful, wholesome wish that all beings be free. So even if you changed absolutely nothing about what you were doing on your day-to-day basis, but your mind was saturated with bodhicitta, that would be an enormous transformation. It's really a beautiful feeling to kind of dedicate ourselves there. It can be tricky. We don't quite know what we're looking for, who's the target of our bodhicitta. All beings can feel too great or too vast. But when we can kind of land in the feeling, not worrying if we're doing it wrong, the feeling is, just that fundamental tenderness of heart, of meeting the world. And the world is full of difficulty and struggles. And if we stay open with it, there's this sense of just deep authenticity. We're not trying to be somewhere else. We're not trying to deny what's here. And in there, we can actually relax, feel more fully ourselves. So that's a bit of the kind of the magic of bodhicitta. There's a stanza from Shanti Deva in the very early part of the book. He says, "Those who wish to overcome the sorrows of their lives and put to flight the pain and suffering of beings, these are the ones who practice bodhicitta." So there's this kind of courageousness of heart to turn towards all beings. And there's also just this, beautiful quality of heart that can be open to all beings. So in our practice here tonight, I'm going to invite us to kind of return in a variety of ways to this feeling of bodhicitta, and to also find for ourselves a sense of ground and stable ground. These are, needless to say, groundless times. Not the good groundless, where we're floating in non-dual awareness and feeling unattached to any idea of what we need to be or who we are, but that kind of groundless when we had an idea of what was important, what mattered, what held us up, and that seems to be slipping away, right? So it's a really nice time to practice the kind of ground we can get through meditating, especially with the body and the breath, the home ground of our practice. For some of you, maybe many of you, that could be your primary practice, this breath and this body, but to kind of really give ourselves a lot of time and a lot of patience in coming back there. Because my very strong suspicion is that most of you didn't spend your whole day in a grounded place, focusing on your breath and your body. Anybody? Maybe there was a moment or two, maybe, right? And it can be very hard to land. And I think these practices are by no means complicated or even unusual. But what is tricky is like being able to switch from this world that we inhabit and that we live in. We're often, we're existing in this upward and outward, kind of a couple feet ahead, a couple minutes ahead, maybe a couple hours or days ahead of the present moment, and to really let ourselves land and be right here. That's what grounded is, right here, not everywhere else, not held back with regret or worry. So we're going to stop the time traveling and give ourselves, hopefully, at least a one-way ticket for the purpose of this practice to the present moment and arrive here together. So let's take a moment to find a posture that's supportive. And first, begin by giving ourselves the opportunity to feel the groundedness of being together. Whether we know others in this room, whether we are here on our own, whether we are at home with others in the same space, just this sense that we are all here in practice together. Feel, sense, or imagine the trustworthiness of practicing together in a similar way that people have been practicing for thousands of years. The trustworthiness of that, we can relax into these teachings. Finding a sense of ground in the trustworthiness of this body, this mind, this heart. Can we have a simple appreciation of this body, this mind, and this heart, without any comparison, without any judgment, just experiencing this simple, beautiful, living presence in the body. With these refuges of Sangha, Dharma, and Buddha, can we meet and approach the body with so much gentleness and care, giving ourselves time here to just be with the body as it is. And of course, there will be distractions. The mind will wander, sounds or sensations will arise. Each time we get this opportunity to return and reunite with being in a simple, welcoming presence with the body. can be challenging to not slip into dullness, a feeling just of soft warmth, which is nourishing in some ways, but seeing if we can find a bright sense of vividness, presence of being with the body. If we're needing a bit more of that bright, vivid presence, we can focus a bit on the inhales. And if actually our mind feels too busy, continuing to carry us away and feel agitated, we can focus more on the exhales. Main anchor still the body, but just giving ourselves what we need internally, using introspection to help us find the brightness, vividness of our attention, or to extend and expand with that sense of ease. Checking in with yourself, the mind and the body. And again, really kindly returning and shifting now to a practice of imagination, one which helps us feel a sense of this space and this moment that we are inhabiting by gaining perspective and zooming out. And so feel, sense, or imagine just the shape of the body seated here in this room or seated in our homes online. Imagine that we could experience seeing this body from the roof or the ceiling of where we are in this moment. Seeing just the simple seated form, the slow rise and fall of the breath. And then imagine zooming out even a bit more, seeing this form within a couple mile radius of everything around. The houses, the trees, the streets, the freeways. Just up above at the cloud line. If visualization doesn't come naturally, no problem. Just consider what it might be like to be looking down at our form. And continuing to rise and getting the greater contours of the landmass that we are on. And depending on where you are, maybe the ocean that is around it or the bay. Imagine traveling even higher up. We have this beautiful Shiva sliver moon. Imagine being on the very edge of that moon, looking down on this beautiful, perfect home, this planet. And of course, it would be impossible to see our single form, but imagining it down there. Imagine this overview of all the beings on this planet, all the life forms, the water, the land, the atmosphere. And then slowly coming back to that level of the clouds, seeing the landmass of this physical location, the ocean and the bay surrounding it. And then imagine coming back to the ceiling or the roof, just above the body. And then with some sense of delight, coming right back home to this body, this place, this space. Feel or imagine you are re-inhabiting this body, re-sensing, revitalizing breath by breath. And with this precious human body, this precious human life, seeing if you can sense just that simple, essential care, caring to be healthy and well in this body, caring that other beings could be healthy and well in their bodies and lives. The beautiful phrases of the Bodhisattva vow may stir a bit of that spark of bodhicitta. May I be an island for those who need landfall. May I be a lamp for those who need light. For those who are weary, may I be a bed for them to rest upon. And for those who are suffering, may I be both medicine and doctor. And imagining this possibility, we could commit ourselves in thought, word, and action to this beautiful aspiration, not just now, but for as long as space remains. So too shall I remain, to dispel the sorrows of this world. Continuing to feel the trustworthiness of this body, this breath. And simply as we breathe in, knowing we are breathing in with the whole body. And as we are breathing out, knowing we are breathing out with the whole body. Bringing just a little bit of curiosity. Can we really sense breath throughout the whole body? And allowing this to tether our mindfulness to the breath. Thank you for your practice. So here we get to have some time to connect and reflect with one another. And in order to do so, we have to kind of constellate ourselves as a community each time. And this community is so beautifully supported by the generosity of others, so entirely volunteer supported and run. And then it's also supported by our compassion. Like we generate a container of compassion here, and being able to listen with the ears of compassion, being able to speak through the heart of compassion with our voice. And so that when we engage with one another, we use it as part of our practice. So that's the parameters for engaging with one another. How does that sound to everybody? Sound good? Wonderful. So this is a great time to hear any reflections on that practice, any questions, any confusion. What did you notice? I don't know where the mic is in here. Oh, sweet. Tom, you want to start us off since you have it?
Well, thank you for the beautiful practice. I felt that sense of imagining sort of rising and rising and rising. And of course, it's so, and while you were doing it, I was thinking, wait, where's the Bodhichitta part of this? And then just somehow this image of looking at this, beautiful, unbelievable place, it just, made my heart sing in a certain way, and it felt so. So it felt like I was able to kind of stay connected to that, and coming back down into this place, which is also, sort of beautiful and amazing as well. And so it was really, so it felt like it was kind of a nice way to approach kind of that tenderness that you've been talking about. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Yeah, and it is, some of you might know this term, the overview effect. So is it Arthur C. Clarke, I think? He was an astronaut, I think he probably one of the earliest ones, the first time where they had this image of the Earth, like this little marble. And when he saw it from space, like many of us kind of grew up with these images, not everybody, but when it was first seen, this was a revelation to see our entire planet. And his experience, what he later termed the overview effect, he had a profound mystical, spiritual, transcendent experience. He recognized the beauty of this interconnected planet and then committed the rest of his life to finding ways to support people to recognize our interdependence. No spiritual practice, no religious orientation, and really beautiful. And this practice is something I've heard Pema Chödrön lead before, and it is a kind of back door to bodhicitta, or can be, just seeing this whole planet, seeing ourselves that way. But it's also a way to, sometimes we're so stuck, not even here in the body, but kind of just like in this mode of thinking, doing, and planning. And when we just give ourselves that little bit of space, or quite a lot of space, and then return, can also help us feel a bit more grounded. And I think ground is a good place to start for bodhicitta. I think we need to have that kind of solid ground from which we can then really extend it to others in a supported way. And I've been really feeling the need for groundedness these days, maybe some of you as well. Thank you.
It felt like I'm used to a feeling of warmth as a kind of a bodhicitta indicator, but this was sort of like an aesthetic beauty of feeling of like, just this is so beautiful. So it was so much more multidimensional than just that feeling of warmth, which also is lovely, but this was just really a different take, which I appreciated.
Thank you so much, especially since you were volunteered to share that. Anyone else? Other thoughts or reflections on that practice?
Well, I shared the aesthetic experience, and you did something so lovely. You gave me a new acronym, that vivid awareness and sense of ease. That is the perfect antidote, because what we seem to have an epidemic of is dullness, distraction, and anxiety. And
True.
so the VASE, it's a vase. It's something that holds water and flowers. So I create these little devices for myself. And so I will never look at a vase the same
Aw,
way.
thank you, Chris. Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. Any friends online? Is there, I think there's hand, it's hard, I'm sorry, my eyes are getting worse. Claudia and then Jason. Yes. Hi, Claudia.
Hi, Eve. I just want to say that I love that meditation. I really, really enjoyed it. And I could really visualize as we were zooming out, and I saw myself almost as if I was a little girl, as an animated kind of figure, kind of sitting on this crescent moon. And it was so lovely. It was just wonderful as we were getting, farther and farther, but still seeing the earth. And then you said something about like when coming back and the delight. You used that word, the delight of coming back to the body. And it was indeed, I mean, that's what I felt. It was just wonderful. Thank you so much. And I also want to say that, I don't know, to me, it's very comforting. Who knows? But I mean, who knows what happens when we die? But to me, I really find comfort in thinking about, well, we have the same elements as they are in space in our body.
Yes.
And to think about like going back to the universe and being part of it, it's just, I love that. So. Anyway, thank you so much. And also, I just want to say that what you said about feeling the tenderness and opening our heart to the suffering of others, we feel authenticity, and we can relax. And indeed, it's just so beautiful to be able to
Yeah,
connect with other human
yeah.
beings. So thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Claudia.
Mhm.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and I love that idea of imagining ourselves returning and rejoining with the elements. I've been really having a strong sense recently of literally being of the earth, right? Everything that has composed this body at some point came from the earth, and that kind of, earth element, and it can be quite comforting and beautiful. Yeah, just that kind of aesthetic beauty sometimes in our practice that we generate can be so supportive. There is something very creative and very beautiful about practice. It's not just breath, stick on the breath, right? There is a bit more that can be felt and experienced in the imagination and the expansiveness and the tenderness of heart. So, yeah, thank you. Jason, hi there.
Hi, it's great to be here, and I really love the feeling of rising, and I've been having a lot of personal experience with feeling like awareness is like the rising sun. It really relates to kind of feeling like just to kind of think of it like here we are on the planet grounded, and then awareness is kind of lofting above all this kind of, there's so much busyness in my mind even, but I've had it's really been comforting to think about rising above it. And I feel my whole posture and my inner eye rising into the sun, like the sun rising. And it's been really wonderful to use that. So now there's this other kind of like, what I really enjoyed about this practice was sort of looking down and seeing my place. It makes me feel really small. which is humbling and very important to just kind of register.
Yes, beautiful.
Really
You
great.
are weaving it all together. Thank you. Yeah, and that, that kind of sacred humility, which is our right relationship with this world. That's how we should feel. There's no question. It's unbelievable, right? And here we are, just, these tiny little beings living inside of our own narrative, and we really lose sight of that bigger picture. And that humility is, it's not this deference, it's not, again, self-denigration. It's just seeing clearly, right? And it's beautiful to experience that quality through practice. I think it gives us that ground also. Part of the ungroundedness is this loftiness, this elevation, this kind of feeling we should be more, we should be bigger, as opposed to, wow, how amazing to be, how wonderful, how unexpected, what an unbelievable reality just to be a little being with all these other beings. I had I might have mentioned this, a friend who's a physicist, and he was saying that this planet exists despite the overall desire of the universe to collapse into entropy is a miracle. And I was like, wow, I feel that entropy for sure. And that our, very existence is evidence that it's unexpected. Beautiful. I just wanted to highlight one other thing from the practice, and again, in the important effort of finding our ground. I don't want to impose what I'm feeling on everyone, so I'd be very curious to hear from you all as well, but that ungroundedness sense, it really can be so pervasive, especially if we have time and aren't distracting ourselves. You can really see that a lot of the distractions and the busyness of life kind of helps us not sense or feel the lack of ground. But to find ground in our practice, and to find ground in general, but we can do it in our practice, in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, and opening that way. And we did it, I like opening the other way of like imagining the Sangha, right? So even when we're just practicing on our own, we can imagine the Sangha with us, right? And then the Dharma, oh my God, these teachings, it's so awesome. There's so few things that exist in our day-to-day life that really have been passed down to us, like this gift passed down through time. And there's such a trustworthiness in that. There can be so much resistance to it. Like, well, if these teachings have been around this long, shouldn't the world be a better place by now? And you're like, yeah, it just hasn't really been widely adopted enough to really make that value judgment. And geez, when I have encountered the cultures where Buddhism has flourished, it's pretty good. There's a lot of benefit going on there. And it can be hard for it to feel like it's for us. Like, oh, that was thousands of years ago. That's so different from how we live now. But then, you really notice or get close to the teachings and what they say. Like this 8th century text is extremely relevant. And again, it kind of gives a little bit of that sense of humility, and also just that sense of gift. The reason these teachings exist now is not an elaborate business scheme to perpetuate the teachings, right? It's the reasons the teachings exist now is because when they meet the heart, all you want is to share it. All you want is to share it. And there's been so many people whose lives have been so profoundly transformed that all they want is to share it over and over and over and over. Give up everything in order to share it. So I definitely believe, I'm like, oh yeah, I totally trust in the Dharma. And then I realize when things are very hard, I'm like, I need something to help me. And I'm like, oh, right, the Dharma. Like I can easily forget it's there for me. And so to kind of call on it as a refuge in and of itself, just the living stream of the teachings and the people it moves through beautifully. And then that sense of, this this human being potential, this Buddha, this awake nature waiting to happen, our just basic goodness, to have refuge in that. Not how far along we are, not what we've accomplished, but just the basic, natural, resting goodness. It's a trickier one for many of us. And yet here we are. So there's some the kind of intrinsic knowing of our goodness is moving towards goodness, and to kind of trust in that. So beautiful piece. And before we move on from kind of the first part of the benefits and value and importance of bodhicitta, I'd love to just ask if folks have questions, because bodhicitta is not necessarily the easiest concept or idea, and we will continue to revisit it, but it's a nice time when we're really looking directly, especially at these first stanzas in the book, the first chapters in the book. Are there any questions or reflections specifically on bodhicitta? I won't give you a pop quiz to ask you what bodhicitta is, don't worry. Yes.
Just really quick, translate that.
Just so the people on Zoom can hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bodhicitta. So the memory is the second thing that goes, and I don't remember the first thing.
Yeah.
What is bodhicitta
Bodhicitta
in
is
English?
the awakened heart-mind.
Awaken heart mind.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, it all makes sense now.
This idea, it's a quality, it's an orientation. It really is this feeling that kind of what we are here for, what we can most effectively use our life energy for, is that awakening of the heart-mind. And the awakening of the heart-mind, for the sake of all beings, it's not as though we'd immediately go out and try to help everyone. We actually have many chapters of how to kind of go upstream to remove the pollution of the mind before we try to actually help other beings. Because that aspiration is so beautiful, and that aspiration becomes a reliable motivation to do the work. If we're doing the work just for us, sometimes we're like, yeah, well, maybe I'll just watch TV and have some pizza. It sounds good, right? But if we're like, no, I really want to kind of continue with this work of bodhicitta because it impacts so many others. That motivation is so much stronger than just, I want to feel less miserable. Surprisingly, because not feeling miserable is a good motivation, but it expands our motivation, supports our motivation. We are so much more motivated socially than we are individually. Yeah. Other questions other than that was a very good one. What is it? Yeah, we could start there. Any other questions? Yes. And your name, please.
My name is Travis. What you just said, the motivation of others, I experienced that. I feel like I feel that a lot. But also, almost as if I'm playing devil's advocate, I can imagine the motivation of carrying the message to others also potentially being overwhelming, and being able to come back to simply oneself could also be useful. So I don't really have a question, but I'm just kind of,
Yeah.
I'm recognizing that there's, as in all things, there's a need for balance, but also of, I guess, giving oneself what you need, knowing that you can find where you want to be on that spectrum that works for you. just amusing, I guess.
Yeah.
I am musing.
Yes. Amusing is nice too. Yeah, and I think this is a fundamental struggle that folks have with there's always been suffering, there will always be suffering. How do we orient to it? Do we completely ignore it? Do we take a little bit in? Do we just concern ourselves with what's immediately around us? And the Bodhichitta is outrageous. It's not just, may I be kind to most people. It's all beings of all time, as long as space remains. And the reason it's outrageous is because it wants us to kind of exercise the very possibility of what we think is something we can imagine and feel. Because otherwise the heart can kind of get more and more closed, more and more closed towards others. As we have hardship, as those we love have hardship, I can't do more. And bodhicitta is largely, and this isn't to diminish it, but aspirational. There's the orientation of how we think and how we operate as opposed to literally emptying ourselves out for others. And that's a specific tool that we need to work on, is how do I care without the distress of feeling like I can't do it? So this idea of like, can I feel some sense of efficacy, agency, purpose, strength in my aspiration of bodhicitta? And it is a little bit of a leap of faith to do so, to believe practicing this makes a difference. But I think it really does. Not only from my own first-person experience, and I assume many of you, that's why you're here, but also, we look at the power of imagining the world that we want to see or that we want to live in. I heard this beautiful story from one of the elders of the wayfinders in the Asian Pacific Islands, and these wayfinders who would go out, on these little boats and find islands just using the stars with no other, so-called no other instruments. And one of the advice of these elders to someone who was learning was, you have to imagine the island and then find it in your mind. And that's what will guide you there. So it's almost like imagine the world in which all beings are free. Keep imagining that world. Keep imagining that world. And that's how you navigate your way there. It's just a different way of, it's overwhelming, there's always suffering, I can't do anything. Nothing actually has changed in the world, and maybe not even your behavior, but how do we orient towards? And then when we're doing this job of unpolluting the mind stream, we are so much more naturally available to be supportive and helpful. And it really is kind of mind-boggling. It's so cheesy and cliche at this point, like smile at the person who's checking out your groceries, like, right? That's like classic secular mindfulness, compassion practice. But that's really nice. Like when you are, kind of nice without a reason to anyone who you run into, it's a big difference in the overall, not only the energy you're putting into the world, the energy the other person is receiving, and the dynamic interplay of this world we live in, which is co-created, right? I'll just take it one step further. I just love the idea of when we think of consciousness, not as in here, not as in there, but in here, right? Co-created. And if we're contributing to that through this sparkling bodhicitta mind stream, it's beautiful. And with like full humility, this is really hard to do. And I think for most of us, we get glimmers of it, glimmers of it, glimmers of it. We sustain it occasionally, but what develops is this longing, like we want it. We want to live in that sense of, I am here for the sake of all beings. That purpose feels so aligned. Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts? Bodhicitta. Yes.
Like when you talk about bodhicitta and the awakened heart, and it's filled with kindness and love and compassion. I've also heard you talk about, and I experience a lot about sort of brokenheartedness, in a sense of like when you wake up to what's around you and
Yeah.
also what's inside you. It's not like, oh, everything is so wonderful. Why didn't I do this years ago? You know, it's kind of like it's really sad and really like discouraging. And I'm just, it's like two really different metaphors about the heart, but I just have this sense that you have a way in which they all fit in the same picture. And if it's not too distracting, I'd love to hear your thoughts
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I mean, I do think, yeah, I think that longing, to feel more free can have a quality that's quite sad, because we see how far we are from that freedom. And then there's this also, there's the kind of relative reality truths of when we lose someone or we lose something, and that has its quality of emotional sadness. That's just true. But the waking up to the heartbreak or the heartache of the world, with bodhicitta, it does become like the very ingredients for waking up. And so we're orienting it less as, this is so unfortunate. Like there's so much difficulty and pain and suffering, and it's just, I got to do my best to meet it because it's so bad. We just kind of look at it as, this is life's curriculum for us, and this is how we wake up. And if you look at, again, the literature on like post-traumatic growth, or the way that people not just cope with loss, but actually really grow from loss, not always, but often, there's a little bit of that, because indeed, as we become more sensitive through meditation practice, we do become more porous to the world. And there is sometimes a feeling of greater sense of weight, but there's also a greater sense of where that can live or where that can exist from. It's like we're widening the base field, and there's more compassion that can arise from that base field. Yeah, it's a great question, Tom. I'm gonna have to think about it more too, because I think when we get stuck in that, there's sorrow, and then there's the shenpa, then there's like the hook of staying with our sadness. And that is often like a self-oriented story. And so bodhicitta, again, it's like, yes, of course you can feel sad, and remember that everyone is sad. So bodhicitta is that like agent that helps us no longer feel that anything that is difficult is just ours. It kind of opens us up. So it's so interesting. So yeah, we have a loss and we're like, this is so hard and so painful. Oh my gosh, so many beings experience this. It's just unbelievable how many people experience this. And though that's also hard, it's way less hard. So I think the alternative is quite hard. I mean, some people, do you guys have those people in your life who it really feels like nothing bad has ever happened to them? Like they just got it going on, everything's like really working for them. Well, A, it's probably not true. But then at some point, they will experience a profound loss, because that's just life, right? And to have had no prior experience of it and no ability to relate, the feeling of loss towards, what happens to others is really tricky. And so not that I wish more loss upon myself or anyone else, but I do see it as, like the prima materia of empathy and compassion. So, yeah, thank you. Anything else on bodhicitta before we move on? Great to hear everybody's thoughts, questions. Yes, please, Andre.
I want to add like a rational or logical perspective on it. That I feel that if you believe in karma and in reincarnation, which it may not be very easy, but once you get past that point, that it's kind of the only logical motivation that you can have, right? 'Cause
Totally.
Because there's no way you can work on healing your bad karma and getting on ignorance and reaching some enlightenment state, and then there's no way you're not gonna, like the most logical approach, the most rational thing to do after is to help others do the same thing. Like there's absolutely no rational way you're gonna just keep that for yourself.
Yeah.
So it's ultimately it's the only thing that makes sense, basically. That's how I see it.
I agree. From a rationalist approach, even if you only believe in one lifetime, honestly, and you look again at physics instead of metaphysics, right? Just we literally are all connected, and there's no way that we can actually completely get free and be okay if others are not also getting free and be okay. You know, that it's the interconnected world, like literally the air we breathe. So we kind of have to create an elevated consciousness that cares about survival and the planet and others. And then I think, you know, the other point, we talked about this a couple weeks back, if you do believe in past lives, and especially the kind of cosmology in Buddhism where we've had so many past lives, that every single being you encounter was your mother or your father in a past life, then you really, you really start having a different sense of how you treat others, or they might be in the next life. But I think, you know, sometimes in our modern culture, we treat relationships as disposable. Like, I'm never gonna see that person again, who cares? Oh, they're just transactional. They're just in between me and what I need to get done. I'm just buying tires. I'm just whatever, you know, doing this. It's a very, I don't want to say, well, I will, ignorant way of seeing it, you know, ignorant in the Buddhist context of not seeing clearly, not a willful ignorance, but every single person, you know, that we interact with and that we kind of like just don't pay attention to, there's a missed opportunity, and there's also this like accumulated dehumanizing that we're practicing, that we're cultivating. We're not including everybody into our experience, and that actually does take a toll. And maybe it doesn't come back to us like, you know, like a Black Mirror episode where everybody's rating you and you are voted out of society if people don't like you. But more that like that, not including others in your sphere of concern who you interact with directly, you start to become more alienated, more separated, like less connected in general. So it is very, you know, there's a philosopher, a psychologist at a UC Berkeley who makes the case for selfish altruism. And I don't love it. I don't love that, but it's true altruism, right? Which is in some ways similar to bodhicitta. Altruism is very self-serving. It makes sense. If you want to survive and be well, you should be generous to others. It will come back. So, yeah. Trickle down altruism. Yeah. But it's so funny because like bodhicitta is all about the motivation. So like if your motivation is self-serving, you kind of ruined it at the beginning. And you know, Shanti Deva talks about that. If you're just giving these offerings and there's not the motivation, you may as well throw the offerings into the river. They don't matter at all. So it's not what you have to offer. I don't know if you remember in these first chapters, you imagine offering flowers and palaces and gilded swans. Like you are offering everything in just this imaginary way of how can we make the mind feel so rich with that quality of offering. Just beautiful. So then we get into our chapters. Oh wait, I wanted to read one more thing here from the beginning. Oh yeah, it's so beautiful. Aspiration bodhicitta brings enormous benefit. For those of us wandering in samsara, it bears rich fruit. We can see why this would follow. At the level of intention, we begin with what's manageable and let our understanding evolve. By the time we're able to act on our intention, we have realized something profound. We've understood that selfless action liberates us from fear and sorrow. Our intention to free all beings from suffering can become irreversible, bringing us benefit equal to the vastness of the sky. This happens when we no longer question the wisdom of thinking of others. We truly know this to be the source of indestructible happiness. Something shifts at the core of our being, and when it does, we experience a ceaseless flow of benefit, even during sleep and inattention. So I love this idea, that when we no longer question the wisdom of thinking of others, we know the true source of indestructible happiness. So just that beneficial offering. And again, it's not that we're literally offering everything we have till we have nothing. It's just this quality of generosity of how we move through the world. And then the next couple chapters are all about like how we practice well, and really highlighting this need for like attentiveness, really paying attention to our experience, tethering that wild elephant of the mind, and avoiding kind of our habitual reactivity that's so common. And this is the core actually of our practice. How do we recognize our habitual tendencies that cause harm? And then how do we get right to the root of them? Because we're all, they're happening. Everyone in this room know their habitual tendencies that cause harm. Like no one needs to tell you what they are, right? Like we know. It's not like that part we don't actually need instructions on. But it is like, how do we stay motivated and how do we stay focused and committed to working with them? So that's why the bodhicitta has to be like so strong as a motivation. Like I really want to do this. I see its benefit. I am completely convinced that it will bring me indestructible happiness, and that for all beings. And then the attentiveness, we really have to see our kleshas clearly, our kleshas being our destructive emotions, and also recognize the shempa. And when I was getting ready to teach tonight, I had this sense, I don't know if this will bear out as I continue to practice and pay attention, but that the kleshas, these difficult and disturbing emotions, they're kind of like distraction. Whereas the shempa, which is when we get hooked, is more like contraction. And so being able to really recognize when we become distracted by these thoughts of how wronged we were, or how scared we are, or how uncertain this, that, or the other is, and our desire to control. Like that's a big distraction. It's funny because, as many of you know, I love the world of emotions. I respect emotions. I see their wisdom. And yeah, they're a big distraction, right? They really pull us away. They can really yank us out of the present, out of what's actually happening. So really seeing clearly that distraction. And then that shenpa, that not just that we feel lonely, anxious, irritated, but that we kind of like get stuck there. We get hooked. We kind of fixate on it. We become entrenched with that emotion. It's a really important piece to kind of monitor and to mind. Let me just read one thing from there. It's like such a fun book to go back through oh yeah, oof, so good. Tigers, lions, elephants, and bears, snakes, and every hostile beast, those who guard the prisoners in hell, all ghosts and ghouls, and every evil phantom. By simple binding of this mind alone, all these things are likewise bound. By simple taming of this mind alone, all these things are likewise tamed. For all anxiety and fear, all suffering, boundless in boundless measure, their source and wellspring is the mind itself. So this idea that we, if we really start to recognize the source of our suffering as our mind generating endless kind of ghouls and elephants and tigers and lions and bears. I've shared with many of you here, being on the month-long retreat in February, it just was undeniable that the source of my suffering is my mind. There's no other thing, right? It's my own mind. and the desire to control and the replaying of uncertainties and the trying to predicting a safer future. And that's not going to change. I mean, hopefully it'll change slowly, but how we relate to this. And so this idea that we can tame the mind. And taming the mind is really learning, as we've been talking about a lot these last couple of weeks, this simple distress tolerance. Can I be with what's uncomfortable? That I don't know what's going to happen next, that I feel irritated, that I feel disrespected, that I feel lonely. If we can stay with the simple experience of the wild elephant, bear, tiger, lion of the mind, then it won't go around making such a mess of everything. So there's this real kind of clear seeing that we really need to tether the mind with this mindfulness, this attentiveness to what we are actually energizing in our ruminative thoughts, and to develop this distress tolerance, this patience to be with our difficult emotions. And we worked with anger for many weeks, and I'm sure we will need to again. But just as a reminder that, with anger, there's a lot of kind of the reframing. Are we able to kind of develop enough familiarity with our anger that we can see sometimes when there's actually a tenderness beneath it, sadness beneath it that needs our attention? Is there a way for us to develop this sense that working with anger and learning to not react helps us train for future adversity, which will certainly come, and that there's always a choice when we are working with anger of whether we kind of continue to strengthen our resentment or we choose empathy. We choose a different way of seeing. So really recognizing that opportunity. And then coming to our current chapter, this last one on training the mind. There's, these two pieces, it feels like there's almost two full chapters on patience. And this stanza says, "The pleasure that you gain therefrom itself gives rise to stainless happiness. It's urged on by all the holy ones and is the perfect way of winning others." So this idea that the pleasure that you gain from enjoying the enjoyment of others, from empathetic joy. And this idea that patience can give us 4 joys, that's what this stanza really unpacks. So that there's idea that one of the joys is that we get this stainless happiness. And whether we intend it or not, often our happiness, something that we get, someone else doesn't get. Like, we're so happy we got the job. That means like 10, 20, 30 other people didn't, right? Or we're, so happy that we were first in line and we get the best choice of this thing. We're so happy they still had that pastry, right? Whatever it is, that feeling is like a joy that actually others struggle from. And so this joy of practicing patience is like a stainless joy, kind of an interesting way of looking at it. And then that there's another way in which, we get this joy is that when we practice patience with everything in our life, it reduces over and over our feelings of the opposite, impatience, irritation, all the way up to anger and rage. And feeling angry and feeling irritated is exhausting, depleting, unpleasant. And so this idea that our patience can help us, overcome or meet that feeling of frustration and, I wish it was different. I don't like it like this. This is so fucked up, right? That kind of energy, that we can get this joy just of relief. Sometimes people miss out. Like, one of my favorite forms of happiness is relief. We all think about bliss and contentment, but relief is a really nice form of joy. And then this joy, this idea that patience actually brings us closer to our Buddha nature. So when we practice patience, we are like aligning with the intrinsic potential that's always within us to be that kind of imperturbable. When someone has patience, there's so much allowance that we get. We think of, I watch my friends who are parents, and they are, emanations of patience by and large, most of the time. Over and over the kid, why, no, yeah, and they're just like right there with that love, right there with that love. That quality creates such a stable base for other beings to be around, that patience. And then the fourth joy of patience. So we have like this stainless joy. We have this joy of releasing some of the burden of our rage. So the joy of relief, the joy of just being aligned with these, contemplative values. And then there's also the joy that when we are practicing patience, we can communicate more clearly. People can hear us well. We can be received well. I like that form of joy. So that's a very sweet one. And then the end of this chapter, which I want us to, we have a moment or two to talk about, is really, reminding us that we have to use patience and we have to use reframing to overcome envy. And that, empathetic joy, this ability to delight in others receiving merit, others receiving praise, others receiving goodness, the contraction that we can feel. It's really funny. I guess some of you know this was a monk who lived in Nalanda in the 8th century, and he lived with many other monks, and it seems like there was maybe some contentious feelings going on, but just so many pages on why can't you be happy for other people? Makes me think this might have been an issue in the monastery. Like you're the one who wants to be praised, and if someone else is praised, you feel bad or angry about it. And so one of the stanzas here is, if you don't want other beings to be happy, how could you, if you don't want them to even be happy temporarily, how could you want Buddhahood for them? How can anyone have bodhicitta and resent others for having goodness? So if you really have bodhicitta, like you're not going to be upset when someone else gets praised and you do not. If someone else receives a gift, or if that gift stays in the benefactor's house, in neither case will it be yours. So why is it your concern? Why don't you resent yourself when you throw your merit and faith away? Why do you not cultivate your own source of inner riches? There's another stanza here. You who want the happiness of beings have wished to be enlightened for their sake. Why would it upset you when someone else finds pleasure for themselves? If you truly wish that beings are enlightened, when petty marks of favor come their way, why are you in torment? So it's really kind of calling us in on this aspect of envy, and that we need to practice a patience of being able to allow another person to be, doing well, receiving well, even if we think they don't deserve it. Does that ring true for anybody? Anybody struggle with envy now and then? Yeah. Comparison. Why do they have that and I don't? I think it's a really tricky one. And this bodhicitta, like it really asks us to imagine that whatever praise they get, could it be in some ways in service of their awakening? If we want them to, have a perfect awakening, the heart of bodhicitta is we want all beings to have perfect awakening. Can we also be okay if they get undue praise now and then? Like, that's okay too. Like, that's not undermining their well-being. So it's really inviting us to kind of open up with our ability to feel the rejoicing of others who we don't agree with, maybe who we don't even like. And Pema says here, there's no practice more important than relating honestly and sanely with the irritations that plague us in everyday life. There's no practice more important than relating honestly and sanely with the irritations, comparisons, envy that plague us in everyday life. So I'm curious, does this ring true for anybody? Are there petty envies that you have that maybe could use a little releasing? Feelings of comparison, not wanting others to be happy. I saw some nods, but no one willing to really fess up to that. Yes. Yeah. And it doesn't feel good, right? I mean, part of these stanzas and part of this work is like really seeing clearly the personal cost of these ways that we're limiting our care, that we're putting up these barriers of our care towards others. Yes.
I'm trying to recall example, but can you clarify again the difference between envy and jealous?
Yes.
I want to label my
Yes.
experience.
Yes. Envy is I want what they have. Jealousy is they want what I have. I'm worried they're going to take it from me.
Envy experience. I think recently as I start to take sabbatical and diving deeper into creative work, I would wish I've achieved XYZ, whatever filmmaker, artist, writer's achievement, and
yes.
wish I have taken actions way earlier.
Yeah.
And it's so big, but what's comforting me is I'm in community with a lot of fellow artists and everyone has the same
Yes.
fear or envy or this thing that runs through all of us.
Yeah.
And that's just the good side and the dark side.
Yeah, that's right. And beautiful way to like find bodhicitta in it. Since I feel this way anyway, can I recognize that a lot of people suffer with this and it's hard? And, you know, there's interesting, I was talking to a friend about this, about the envy and in this work. And she said, well, it's not that I don't want them to succeed, but I just don't feel like I'm as successful as them. And so it's more this self-related kind of, you know, diminishing in a certain way. And that's there too. But the envy is really special of like, you know, when it's coupled with, I don't want them to succeed. Their success actually threatens me, which is, you know, like, I get it. Like in some ways that's true. If there's only one prize for the film festival, like only one filmmaker gets it. And yet this idea that there's some limited amount of happiness in the world and if someone else gets it, we won't, is ridiculous. And that like any one prize or any one thing will bring it to us is a delusion. So there's, you know, how do we continue to kind of soften what we believe is the cause of happiness and really consider a true cause of happiness and find ourselves rejoicing and enjoying the rejoicing. Very hard practice. But it's so interesting. Again, I'm just surprised at how many pages of the chapter are dedicated to it. And it has made me look around at my own sources of unhappiness and comparison towards others. It's there. It's really there, right? I think about it. It's a present one for me. So we can think about that together and hopefully find that kind of, you know, grace with it in ourselves, not feeling like it's, you know, as Gladys was saying, it's not something unique. It's such a human thing. But if we can open our heart to the rejoicing, it's such a benefit. So let's give ourselves a moment to come back to the body and the breath. And soften in the face and the chest and the belly. And take a moment to notice if there's some sense of bodhicitta that's here right now, that yearning for the awakened heart for all beings. And then gently placing hands together in front of the heart. And offering out of that beautiful bodhicitta, offering this practice, this time together, this energy. May this all be in service to the outrageous aspiration that all beings everywhere could know love and belonging. All beings everywhere could experience a sense of ease and peace, that all beings everywhere could be completely free. Thank you, everyone.